Hey everybody, today we're going to go over lesson 0.1, which is what it means to have a scientific attitude. So by the end of this video, you should be able to identify and explain the three key elements that make up a scientific attitude and explain why critical thinking is so important when it comes to that critical or that scientific method of thinking. So I'm going to start with a question. I want you to we're going to use this question throughout this video. I want you to think to yourself, you've probably heard this, that we only use 10% of our brains. And I want you to think about that question for just a sec. Write down on your notes what you think. Do you think that's true or false? Why do you think that? And now we're going to jump into the three elements of that scientific attitude using this question. So let's start with curiosity. What is curiosity? Well, we kind of know it when we see it, right? But basically, it's an eagerness to learn more. So when you hear something, you might think, oh, that's pretty cool, and then go on with your day. That does not indicate curiosity. But if you hear something and you're like, wow, that's an interesting thought, I got to really look into this more, you start to become what we call a lifelong learner, and you learn to just love learning for the sake of learning. And so let's go back to our question. Do we use 10% of our brain? If you're a curious person, you're going to start asking yourself some questions. You're going to say, well, why would we only use 10% of our brains? Like, what is the evolutionary benefit for that? What could happen if we actually use more of our brains? And Hollywood has actually looked into that with movies like Lucy, right? So in that movie, she's someone who gets full brain capacity and has all these awesome abilities. I don't know if she uses them awesomely, but still. So just know that that's one way to be curious, right? Start asking questions. The second part of having a scientific attitude is to be skeptical. Now, it's very important that you understand that this is not the same thing as being cynical. So here's a little picture on the bottom here. If you look at someone who is cynical, you can almost say that they're afraid to believe in anything. So they're just going to shut down kind of conversations or questions. They're just going to say, nope, it's not possible. We only use 10% of our brain. Science has shown it. We're good to go. Somebody with skepticism, they're going to believe, but they're going to believe with credible evidence. They're going to say, show me the data. I want to believe, and I want to believe for sure. And then there's people that are idealists, and they're just certain in their belief, with or without data. To me, that kind of falls into the areas of faith and religion, and just having this real idealistic belief that this is the way it is. So let's go back to our question. And our question was, do we use 10% of our brains? And if you're skeptical, you're going to start saying, well, wait a minute, what proof do you have that that's true? Do you have brain scans? Do you have data to back that up? And if you don't, let's test it. Let's see. I want to believe it or not. I don't want to believe that we only use 10% of our brains. But either way, there's ways that we can test it. And so that would show skepticism, which is the second part of having a scientific attitude. Finally, and I actually believe this might be one of the more important ones of all of them, is humility. It's very important as a scientist and just as a human to be willing to be wrong. Science is one of those things that, like, we have these theories, and theories in science are really just intelligent guesses. And you're going to get data that shows that maybe you were wrong. And that's okay, because knowing that you're wrong still moves our knowledge forward. You need to be open to new ideas. It's what we call like a growth mindset. I'm sure you guys have heard that. In psychology, B.F. Skinner, who you're going to learn about, came up with this phrase, the rat is always right. And I love this phrase. So basically, you might have a belief about how things or people or animals are going to behave. But when the rat is in the maze and doing the thing that you're asking it to do, that's the data. And the rat's always right. Like, you can't fudge the data. So let's go back to our original question about is the brain, do we only use 10% of our brain? Sorry, I have some quotes on here. I forgot about that. Ralph Waldo Emerson, a great poet and a great writer, an American writer, wrote, a great man is always willing to be little. Love that quote. You got to love it. And then Carl Sagan is one of my favorite scientists in the world. Unfortunately, he has passed on. He's the guy that wrote Contact, if you've ever watched that movie. But he basically states that modern science is a voyage into the unknown, And there's a lesson in humility waiting at every stop. We are going to be wrong almost all the time. And there's lots of people that would rather stay home than go on this voyage. And I think that's really sad. So let's go back to our question. Do we only use 10% of our brains? So the answer to that, I'm going to let you guys figure it out because you are building your scientific attitude. So on Canvas, you have access to these slides. And I want you to go ahead and click the link that I have on this last slide and dig through. There's a PowerPoint with some proof of whether or not we only use 10% of our brain. It includes things like PET scans and brain scans, and I think you'll enjoy it. So that's it. Have a great day. Thanks, guys.